Okay, so welcome everybody to this Larnaca conference with the topic education. I'm very pleased to have you all with us, and I'm even more pleased to have you with us, Gitta. Gitta Peyn, founder of FORMWELT and keynote speaker, or no, let's say keynote interview partner for this conference. Before we start, I'd like to say some words on Gitta. Over 30 years ago, she and her husband decided to tackle a global education and communication problem with their research, because it was clear to them that humanity would not be able to adequately deal with the major crisis of tomorrow if decisive action was not taken at this point. She's the founder of the FORMWELT Institute, initiator of the Larnaca conferences, international speaker, trains leaders in emergent systemic thinking and management by conflict forms, and developer of FORMWELT, a universal reference system with its FORMWELT online platform will ultimately enable systemic education and communication for everyone, everywhere in the world. Gitta Peyn burns for the chance of every individual on this planet to emancipate himself or herself in his or her systemic sign universe, to finally be enabled to mean what he or she says, and to be able to say what he or she means. She's firmly convinced that a strong global we cannot be possible without strong, self-aware individuals, that compassion and empathy are repeatedly disrupted by poor education and thus conditioning systems. That is why she has devoted her life to research that was roundly ignored for the first 25 years, until the first people became aware of the central role systemic education plays in precisely the form of FORMWELT in cultural and individual development in meta-crisis. Since then, the number of supporters has been increasing daily, and the planned platform FORMWELT Online is expected to be launched in 2022-23. So, welcome again to conference number 3 of this year's Larnaca conferences with Gitta Peyn, whom I have the pleasure to interview. Gitta, yes, Gitta, you always have a lot of fun when people surprise you with questions, and you are not a big fan of pre-planned talks, which is why we have collected questions from potential participants for this conference. I have printed them on small pieces of paper, folded them, and put them into this box. So I will just draw the first 3 pieces of papers, and we will see what comes out. Okay. Are you ready?
As ready as it gets. Let's see how I will deal with this.
So I will officially draw 3 of them.
Okay.
Number 1.
Yes.
I'll take this one maybe. That looks very interesting. Number 2. And here we got number 3. So we will start with it. The first one. Let's see what it is. I see. It's a question by Eva S. And she asks, what value may or must education have in society or community of the future?
That's a very good question. Education is everything. Education is the meta-crisis that leads to other meta-crises. Education is the very foundation of the way how the individual and societies are rhythmizing? Is it rhythmizing? I think it's rhythmizing in English. Themselves into their self-awareness, into their way how they address problems, how they communicate, how they live with each other. So when education is outdated or rigid or not deeply implemented in a systemic way into societies, the individual is dependent on poor prepositions, on rigid thinking, on complexity management, on low levels, etc. That in the end adds up to a society that cannot deal with meta crises like climate catastrophe or the breaking down, sometimes I like words, no problem, of biodiversity, etc. Today we see that some countries work on their education, especially in third world countries, second world countries. They do a great job to implement education that deals with modern challenges. Yes, thank you. But in first world countries, we have the problem that our education systems are outdated. They come from the last century or the century before even, and they are constructed for a society that was in need to have the women in the factories. So they were constructed to get the children from the streets, to release female work power, and they were constructed to deliver people who can work in factories and offices, etc. They were not constructed for people to emancipate themselves in their own sign universes, which is exactly what we now need. And when we look at how teachers, for example, in Germany here are paid, we can break out in cry. In tears, because there we demonstrate how little value we give to education, and how we do not pay those who are imprinting children with society's ideas on knowledge. And then we have children who cannot deal with the complexity of modern times, especially today in globalization, where it means that every single one of us can actually communicate with every single other person on this planet via social media, etc. There's a complexity level now that is completely different from the times of the first half of the last century. And education is everything, and we see it everywhere. People are not prepared to deal with this complexity today. They tend to think everything in one or over one dimension. They tend to have fights in polarized conflicts, like in politics, for example, this party against that party. They do not comprehend that the complexity of today's challenges need a more comprehensive and more systemic thinking. And that is not their fault. It is simply the fault of wealthy societies that did not use their wealth well.
So to follow this up, the heritage of our education is to teach people to do what they are told. I mean, that's what they need to do when they are working in the industry. And the second point that strikes me is that the presupposition of education is that they can put information into the pupils' heads.
Yeah, okay, and that will not work.
Yeah, that's why they still are trying.
Yes, and so many people are frightened of learning, actually frightened. Yes, that others see that they do not know enough, that they are not prepared for what is needed of them. They are frightened, and thus they block new ideas, which creates in mass an innovation. Not friendly, but the other word. Innovationsfeindlich.
Oh,
you don't know it.
Innovation hostile.
Yes, hostile. Thank you. Innovation hostile atmosphere everywhere. There is what we need are strong individuals. Individuals that can emancipate themselves in their own sign universe, so they know what they mean, and they can say what they mean, and they can deal with conflict, and they can deal with irritation, because irritation always happens when we are confronted with something new. And when we have a society that is innovation hostile or is in angst of the new, then we have in fear of the new. Then we have a society and individual that cannot deal with meta crises, because meta crises affect every system in society and affect every system in the human psyche.
Mhm.
It affects existential problems, it affects problems of safety, security, it affects problems of art, design, of how we live together, how we create communities, etc. And people who have poor education, have rigid education, tend to create, in self-conditioning effects, communities that are more dependent on ideology than on knowledge.
Mhm.
And
You mentioned that education in second and third world countries are dealing better than
yes,
let's take the German education.
yes.
Can you give some examples? That's very interesting.
When we have a look at Ethiopia, for example, there they do not have to get rid of the rigid system which was already there, because there was no system they have to get rid of. So they can build everything from the start, which means they can work with digitization, they can work with modern technology, they can far better are in university, talking to the government, etc. That kind of stuff. They have still shortcuts. They do not have to hack the system like we have to. Yeah, that is important. We cannot change the system. We can't. We can only hack it from outside.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, from outside, and say, here is something that works better. Yeah, that is what we can do.
Yeah.
And third world countries do not have this problem. They can begin from the start and then use fresh and new technologies so the children can learn in a completely different way. And I can see this when, from FORMWELT perspective, we have now pilot projects, for example, in India, in Kenya, for example, and the people there, they react completely different to those in Germany. They know they need knowledge. Tell a German, you need knowledge. He or she might get angry. This is not what is happening in third world countries. There, people know they need knowledge in order to get a job, in order to support their families, in order to to reduce world's population. They start to understand this too. Yes, and then they are happy to get a proper and good education. So when we offer a FORMWELT online there, everybody says, yes, well, we want this. Yeah, this will connect us with the whole universe. This will connect us with the children, with other children on the world. This will connect us with adults everywhere. Children can become teacher of adults. Tell this to Germans or people in the US, for example. And then you have to deal with blockage.
Okay, I think we could take another hour to discuss this question, but let's give another question a chance. So I'm opening up the next paper. There's a question by Jan Bellerman, who asks, how do we identify the right content providers, guides, or teachers? Which mindsets, attitudes, skills will be needed to make a difference? And how do we find these people?
Good. It's a good question.
Yes.
First, pay them well. Pay them more than organization designers, etc. You have to pay teachers a good fee. If you do that, you will get good people. Then educate them. Educate them well. Educate them in systemic thinking first, before you educate them in math or whatever. First, they have to understand how the human mind works. When they do not know how the human mind works, they cannot help people to change their mind. If you do not know how you function, you can do it like trial and error and hope something good will come out of it. But you need to know how the human mind works. That's the other part of our research. We now understand how the human mind works, so now we can change it. That's something teachers have to know. That's one point. And there's another we all know. You have to be a teacher by heart. You have to find those people who are enthusiastic about what they want to teach, who love children and other people. Yeah, you have to love those people you work with in order to teach them something. And I often hear people say, don't teach. You cannot imprint or convey or so stuff to people. That's totally twisted. Of course you can. Yes, of course, everybody creates his or her information in his or her own mind. That's one point. But good teachers always have an impression on their pupils. They always. And a good teacher is a person who can relate what he or she knows to his or her experience.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it is vivid, it is full of life. And that is necessary also. And there's one other thing. We need independent platforms for teaching where there is no advertising at all. If we create education systems parted from societies, parted from the people, where you can go there and there you are taught, and then there is life.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's wrong. We have to think education completely new as a conditioning system.
Mhm.
And such conditioning systems are everywhere. So we are taught everywhere. And what we learn today is that our fellow human beings are our enemies.
Mhm.
Yes, when we go
Yeah.
into social media, there's
They are
toxic,
competitors. Yeah. Mhm.
toxic effect of symmetrical conflicts, which are intended. They are intended because when you get people emotional,
Mhm.
then they will buy more stuff. So then there is advertising. You have to get rid of advertising in education platforms, which means we have to create education platforms which are communication platforms, because education is everywhere. Yeah. When we talk to each other, we teach each other stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We learn all the time. We are creative beings. We are high complex beings. We are complexity masters. We learn all the time. That is what we do. So we need platforms where nobody can earn money with our emotions. Nobody can exploit our emotions for a corporate purpose. That is important. We have to get rid of this. Yeah, I do not have a fight with marketing or so. But what I see is a society which becomes deeply affected by marketing in the way people talk to each other. Yeah, they cannot deal with conflict any longer. Everything has to be smooth, and we have to be good persons, and we have to build good collaboration, etc. They unlearn that it is irritation that makes us tick. Yeah, where we see, oh, well, there's something new happening. And that is because everybody is in this mode of, I have to be someone other people like. So that is the result of a marketing society that has no place any longer for the individual. Today, the individual means you buy a T-shirt, yeah, on which you have this imprint. I am an individual, which
and
is
everybody has it.
which is produced in China in one of these super factories for millions of people. Yeah, and that is education too. And all of this we have to become aware of. That is, it is affecting our minds. It is fragmenting our minds, and we are losing individuality. We are losing the power of the individual, and that is what we need in order to address the meta crisis. We need each other.
So it's not just a mere questions about the people teaching in the future, but it's a question about the conditions as well. So maybe we should stop thinking about schools when it comes to education.
I must say I love schools, but not in the way they are built today. Yes, there I'm a fan of Ellen Key, the Swedish researcher on education, century before the century, last century. She was amazing. She had this idea of bringing the children together so they can learn, with people there who can orientate them when they want to know where to find stuff. In Finland, they do it the right way. Yeah, their teachers, of course, they still teach, and teaching is important. We all have to teach what we know every time, everywhere. Yeah, teaching is important, but it is also important to inspire children to not unlearn how to learn. How do we do this? We help them to stay curious, and we support them. We support their curiosity. What is wrong with schools is it's beginning right in the morning. Who wants to stand up at 7 o'clock? Yeah.
Yeah, I know someone. Yes.
Don't get me started. Yeah. Why? Because they wanted the mothers and the fathers in the factory. That's why. There's no other reason. Give the children the chance to start at 10 o'clock so they have time for some sports in the morning or whatever they want to do. And then give them free time to learn and to research, etc., and support them whatever they want to do that. And give them platforms. And here's the important part that is new. Give them platforms where they have the chance to learn with children and adults from everywhere on the planet. Mm-hmm. That is important, that children have a global perspective on what is going on there, and not these 4 walls in a German school or American school or whatever, where they sit with 20 or 30 other children, all learning the same stuff, and then with no fresh air at all, and so on. That's completely wrong.
And giving predefined perspective on everything for everybody, which is just scaling knowledge. Or trying to do that, and destroying the room for creative creation of knowledge.
Yes.
I mean, knowledge has to be created, right?
Yes, and language. Children need to explore other languages and need to create their own languages, which is all possible with FORMWELT. Every child tries to learn the language her or his mother or father are speaking, but children also are highly creative when it comes to new concepts. So to create their own languages is important. That we have to support, because that makes something with your mind. Okay. People polyglots are far more complexity resilient. No, that's not. No, they can work far more creative with complexity and can deal more creative and relaxed with complexity than people who only know 1 or 2 languages. Because when you learn a new language, you have to create your whole personality in this new language. I'm a completely other person when I talk English as when I talk German. I always feel it, or when I talk French or whatever. I see that it changes me. It gives me a new perspective on myself. And that is important. Let us help children and adults all over the planet to become versatile. Yeah, your personality is contingent. And the moment people think, this is who I am, they start to end learning. Because then they try to stay who they are, and then they cannot deal with new things any longer. Or as we say in our research, systems who try to re-entry themselves without any further differentiation die. In the end, that is what they do. Yeah. So we have to help each other to become other people. That is important for children. Yeah.
That's a nice sentence. I would like to keep that somewhere. Shall we have a look at another question?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me see what we have here. So this one is by Claudia Saar, and she's asking, where are the examples where the penetration and application of systemic approaches is already having a practical effect on changes in the right, necessary direction? You mentioned second, third world education.
Yes, but there is still a lack of a systemic thinking there. Today, next to nowhere. That's the hard answer. Because, but on the other hand, during the last century, we had remarkable explosion in scientific understanding of the world. In physics, with quantum physics, Einstein's theory of relativity, stuff like that, with Heisenberg, Turing, with Gödel. And at the same time, because these new understandings of physics and math, humanities developed systems theory and later constructivism. Very important steps in the right direction, but a little bit academic, I think, to the taste of most people, because there was one thing missing. We had no model to comprehend how humans comprehend complexity. So if you take systems theory and try to applicate it on society without understanding how the human mind works and how human communication systems work, the results will be some academics knowing how this stuff works, but even they cannot re-entry it. They cannot reflect it in their own personal lives.
And apply it then. So.
Apply it there. Yeah, there often then spiritual ideology comes, for example, from the direction of spiral dynamics, integral theory from there, and they try to bring this relevant part of awareness into the discussion, but they sometimes overdo it. and we lose the ability to re-specify and to think scientifically. Today, we are at the brink of a completely new era, or from my perspective, we already stepped into a completely new era. And this means that everything is new. Everything is emergent. It emerged to another complexity. And in this other quality of complexity, we now have to create new concepts, new education systems, and we cannot do this with the thinking of the era prior to this. This is important, and this is why I said it's a hard answer, yeah, or a little bit painful answer, because most people think, okay, let's think about the children, about empathy, etc. When you now ask people what do we need in education, they almost talk about soft values. They are important, of course. Yes, I will not deny that. I'm a very empathic and passionate human being, and I love to be compassionate and passionate. But trust, love, empathy, etc., tend to ideologize without a systemic way to educate. So we have to do both. Yeah, we have to learn how we can be aware, but we have to do it in a scientific way. And this we have, then from there, we can build education systems that can help people to comprehend how they function, how they can navigate this new era, this emergence. Yeah, how they can do that. That is important. Ludwig Wittgenstein said the borders of our language mean, that is important, the borders of our world. And that is true. If you have no concepts for this new era, you cannot navigate in it. Yeah. And this era started last century with quantum physics, etc. So we can say, okay, we might have around about 100 years of experience, but in fact, we don't. We have the technical knowledge, now we have to implement it. And this is done by good social platforms, good communication platforms. This is done by freeing our children from bad education, which is perfectly done. If we have children, if we teach children to emancipate themselves again in their own sign universe, because when they can do that, they can emancipate themselves from bad education systems and teachers.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
But that's completely contradictory to the actual education system, at least in Germany, where they try to shorten school time from 13 to 12 years. Yes. So it's the direction is efficiency and being in very short period be able to do whatever. I don't know what they want them to do afterwards. And maybe we take one more question.
And I have one thing here, a personal thing that might be interesting.
Yeah.
I was a bullied child. And that gave me a special perspective on education in school. I had no beef with school. I loved to learn. which did not help with getting sympathy from the other children. And what I saw there, what I experienced there, and of course, as a child, I could not put it in words, but what I saw there was conditioning happening. This is not alone a problem of school. It is a problem of our whole society. Yeah. When you see as a child of 5, 6, 7 years how other children are bullying you, you start to create new questions. What is going on here? Why are they doing that? First, you think you are the problem. Then when you get a little bit more emancipated, you think they are the problem, which is good. Yeah, it's a step forward. But no, they are not. What you see there is society in the looking glass. That, yeah, the children only do what they experience with their parents, with society, etc. So this is a learning behavior. And that is what we have to stop. And we can only stop this by helping our children to emancipate themselves. And the same we have to do with every single adult we meet. First thing I tell everybody is learn how to deal with conflict. Approach it. It's okay. Yeah. If there is nobody supporting you, then you go and find people elsewhere. But start new, start to get curious again, and start to deal with conflicts in a completely other manner. You do not have to motivate children to learn. No. Yeah, but you have to do this with adults, and that has to tell us something where the problems lie. So I'm done. Now you can raise your other question.
No, I think it's very interesting that it will be a hard school life for the first generation.
Yes.
With this new way of education, because these kids, they will have to learn themselves. That's nice, but they will have to teach their parents as well, because they have to get in touch with it and to deal with this as well. Yeah.
Yes, and that will be hard. Yes, the problems will not be the children; it will be the parents and the friends of the parents, etc. Yeah, that will be hard, but it is always the same. Mass makes the whole difference. So if you have a platform where children can see other children do that too and are successful with what they are doing, then they become more self-confident. And no, I have learned this. Come on, Papa, Mama, what's wrong with you?
Great. So one more question.
Yes, please.
There are some more. Okay, so I take this one now. So let me see. This is by Marcus W. Dots. What kind of education should that be? What are the specifics of the systemic complexity education you propose?
First of all, that people learn to unlearn hate of learning. The other is we have to communicate education as a conditioning system. That is important. It is not, education is not when you go to school, open the door and enter the school. That is not education system. Education is everywhere. That is what we have to understand. The way we communicate with each other is part of education. Yeah, our education reflects itself in the way we communicate with each other. That is one part. And the other is, as we said, we are always teaching each other something. That is one point. The other is, as I already said, we have to create universal platforms. Yeah, for everybody to enter, where adults and children can learn with each other, can communicate with each other, and where children can become the teachers of other children and of adults. That is important. So the first thing we have to understand that education is not parted from society. On the contrary, it's everywhere. The other is we have to create platforms where everybody can learn with everybody. So human superintelligence is unleashed. And then we have to understand better, to comprehend that the way we think, act, and speak is the result of our education. So we have to create self-education awareness in society by communicating education as something completely different as most people believe it is. Which with entering the school and there is education and nothing more. That is important. So we have to combine education platforms with communication platforms. This is what we are doing with FORMWELT Online, so that people not only can teach each other, children can create their own curricula with other children and their teachers, etc., but also that people can communicate and use their very communication as education system and analyze how they communicate with each other, etc. So education in this next society, as many sociologists call it, I call it reality emulation, has to be everywhere. Okay. So the specifics are a little bit less specific than expected, and a little bit more thought as a general switch, a paradigm shift, a complete paradigm shift in education. We have organizations, economic organizations have to start to understand themselves as education systems. Yeah, families have to understand themselves as education systems. And that means that not the parents are the teachers of the children alone, but also the other way around, and that the whole system is educating itself along the way. This is something that has to be communicated and has to be taught in universities, in organizations, that it is all about learning all the time. So how we do this makes the difference. And in order to do that, we first have to learn how we learn, how we think. Yeah. So
it's interesting. So and we have to get rid of this evaluation as part of our education. No marks anymore for any kind of products we create.
No, I do not agree. I think it's a good idea for children and adults to know where they stand. It's not the evaluation that is a problem. It is the way we deal with it, the way this, how this is interpreted. If you get a note for a work you have done, then the note can tell you this is good, this is done in a good way or in a poor way. That is not the problem. We have to understand that our judgments are also judged. The judgment is not the problem. The way how we judge the judgment, that is the problem.
But doesn't notes or marks make us to competitors to our mates?
I do not think it's a problem to be competitive. I think it can be a good thing. It's how the conflict is valued. That is the problem. Yes, you are completely right. Our systems today deliver the feeling in the children that they are not good as a person when they have a 5 or 6 in their, or a 4 in their German test, or etc. That is there. I'm completely with you. But I think we have to create new understandings of how we value work, and I think competence matters. Yeah. So I do not think it's completely wrong to get notes, but it is important to comprehend them in a completely different way. Yeah. I would not say that we have to get rid of all notes, and on the contrary, to have notes everywhere. Yeah, but I think some feedback is necessary for the child and the adult to understand how good his or her work was. Yeah, to me, it has an orientation function, not more. But when people think it's a judgment of their value as a human being, that is a completely different thing.
Okay. So, what do you think? Do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we can do one more. We are already over time.
Oh, well, okay, so it doesn't matter anyway.
No, but I think this is something people will love, and we have fun here. So let's do another round.
Yes. So one last by Chris K. Dot. Do we need, inspired by Peter Thiel, a global reframing or shift of focus from education, which has a passive connotation, to learning, which has an active connotation?
That's an excellent question. I do not believe in words, labels, concepts as ontological things. So I do not believe that education is something that is referenced in a general way everywhere. And the same is with learning. I understand from where this question comes, and would say, yes, but we also can easily say, let's reference education in another way, and then we have dealt with the problem equally. Yeah. Yes. What I said, learning is everywhere, education is everywhere. Yeah, so learning is the act, and education we can call the system, the education system. That's what we can do here. But the first thing we have to understand that we are learning beings. That is fun to us, exciting to us, sometimes frustrating to us, etc. It's all part of the party.
Yeah, right.
Yes, and education, a good education is something of value. Yes, if you learned how to be an architect, then you learn how to build houses that will not fall down on the people who live in their houses. So I think that is a good thing. Many people in working in offices who are working with many questions regarding the social life tend now to want to get rid of everything that is competence related and so on. I think that's not a good idea. Yeah, and the architect is a good example to explain why. Yeah, so let's give people a good education, yes, but let's see that the whole education system is learning oriented. So that people have fun learning, but not in that way that it has to be fun. When you learn to play a guitar, your fingers hurt all the time. Yeah, and then you have an inflammation in your shoulder, and then you have a bad day, etc. It's all part of the process. So let us not create people with no spine. Yeah, in the end, let us create systems which are fun, yes, as much as possible, but also that we can deal with conflict and irritation and anger and frustration, etc. at the same time. I often hear people say, let's get rid of angst. Angst is a problem. Why? No, it's a good thing. Evolution has implanted it in us. To be careful when needed, and to deal better with complex problems. Now, this is all wrong when we tend to try to make this or that. So it's here not education, no, and learning, yes, because people are frustrated with the education system. Let us play the antithesis here. Yeah, think in another way. Let's jump to another dimension and say both, like prior with the notes. We can use them, yes, but we have to work on the way we judge things. And it's the same here. So a proper education is Gold wert, as we in Germany say, worth, it's gold worth. And learning is important, yes, but that is a process and an education you get.
Okay, sounds like famous last words for this keynote. So, first of all, thank you very much for answering very intuitive and unprepared these questions. Thanks to all the people who put the questions, and the invitation is don't stop putting questions now. You will have the opportunity to ask more questions, to give your own ideas, own experiences into a discourse, into a discussion, so we can develop on this issue together and get things done, right?
Yes, right. This was fun.